How's it going, everybody? Thank you for stopping by. My name's Antonio, and today I'm talking to Ross McElroy, the CEO of Fission Uranium Corporation, who last time we spoke, he told me that Fission was one of the most undervalued uranium companies out there. So today's going to be an interesting conversation following up on that. But this conversation is also going to be one that's general and impersonal in nature, and also one that will constitute no financial nor professional advice of any sorts, but it will include a lot of hopeful, forward-looking statements. So just beware. And that all said, Ross, thank you for being here today, sir.
Well, it's a pleasure, Antonio. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure is all mine. I'm looking forward to figuring out what you've been doing for shareholders, actually. So maybe you can start off there. What have you done for shareholders since we last spoke about a year ago?
Yeah, so we last talked, I think it was in October 2021, so late part of the fall. Just off the top of my head, some of the major milestones. We've been advancing on our feasibility study, which I'm sure will be a topic of discussion here today, part of it. But parallel with that, we've been working very heavily on the regulatory permitting side, making sure that the project is where it needs to be in order to move the project forward ultimately to production. And equally as important as anything, continuing to build and strengthen our relationships with Indigenous community in our area. So we've been very active on all those fronts this year, and if you've followed our news flow over the last 8-9 months, you'll see agreements that we've had with local First Nations and a couple of different groups that we've signed agreements with, capacity and funding agreements, and also continue to build up our team as we advance the project. We continue to build a team that can get us across the finish line.
Good stuff. Multiple things to touch upon as we go further in the discussion. Do you still have some assay results in the lab, though, that you've got coming?
Yeah. So the remaining assays that we have are from the 840, the R840 West drilling that we did back in 2021. But part of that mission during that drill program was to collect samples for metallurgical purposes. So that was the main priority of 4 of the holes, these met holes. So they're still outstanding from the assay perspective. The work's been done on the metallurgical front. So now those samples are sitting with SRC labs in Saskatoon. I have received notice that they're being processed right now, so I expect that we'll likely have those assay results in a couple of weeks. I'm hopeful. So there are the remaining 4 holes out of that program on the R840, and after that, we'll have all assays received.
Good. That's actually an interesting program to me. Generally, the fact that you keep drilling is interesting to me because I don't think I fully understand why you keep drilling out that asset, since it's already been drilled out pretty extensively if I compare to some of the other companies that I'm in, for example. So maybe you can walk me through your strategy there and tell me why you needed that 6 drill program. Why did you need that to advance the feasibility study?
So I think we're talking about the R840 West zone in particular, which had a classification on the resource of inferred. With an inferred resource, you can't actually do advanced economic studies on it. So really, as far as you can take an economic study is the first phase of PEA. But in order to get it up into the pre-feasibility and feasibility level, you have to have your zone drilled off with enough confidence that you can move the category up to indicated and higher. And so really the R840 West drilling that we did in 2021 was meant to provide enough drill holes into that zone that we could convert the majority of the R840 into indicated, because the aim here is to include the R840 in the feasibility study resource that we're working on right now. So there was a method to drilling more holes in the R840. It wasn't just for the sake of getting additional information, but it was a necessary step in order to get that to the confidence level that the engineers can actually build a mine plan around it. So I think we've done that. We've achieved it. We're still waiting on the remaining 4 assay holes from the metallurgical part of that program. But I think so far the assays have looked very encouraging to us.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you're not drilling just for the sake of drilling and looking busy. So,
yeah. No, not at all. No, they're real purpose meant holes.
But so there's no more drilling planned there before the feasibility study, is that right?
Correct. We're done. In fact, we're done all the field work at this point for the feasibility study. We're if you recall, we're estimating that we'd be able to complete the feasibility study towards the end of 2022. We're still on target to do that. So we're likely over the next 4 months, we'll be able to wrap up the feasibility study. So no more field work at all. All the geotechnical work has been done. All the resource drilling has been done. It's basically a compilation of all the results that we've had to date. That's what's being put together now, scheduling and that kind of thing.
Okay, so that's the main focus now. You've got a couple of other steps that you need to complete, and then you want to have that done by the end of this year, have the feasibility out. And what happens next? Is that, like, I believe your general strategy was to put the triple R into production as soon as possible, basically. You're talking about the end of the decade, so 2030. Is that still your general strategy, or do you think you're going to be looking for potential M&A if the uranium market heats up?
Oh, I think there's going to be all of the above. But the goal really is to have triple R ready for production in this current cycle that we're in. As I mentioned before, our production is, we anticipate that we'd be able to start construction of the mine site by 2026. It's about a 3-year process to build the mine and start bringing ore up. So tentatively, we're looking at being able to be a producing asset with cash flow toward 2029, maybe 2030. And I think if we're I think these are conservative numbers, so I would expect that we'll be able to stick to those kind of timelines quite well. But the whole sector is really quite exciting these days. I think M&A activity is certainly, it's part of the equation. We'll sort of see what happens. As I mentioned before, our goal is really to continue to focus on the project, move the project, continue to build value, get it ready for production, and if there's activity out there that we want to consider, we'll certainly do that. It's really all about building value at the project level and for shareholders.
Okay, but it's probably reasonable for me as a retail shareholder to expect any potential M&A to happen after a feasibility study, right? I mean, it's not probable that something would happen before that, right?
Probably. I mean, because we're talking a very short timeline between now and the end of the end of the year before feasibility is done. But that's really not a timeline that we would control. If there was somebody interested in us, for example, you might not have a lot of warning on when that would be. So, but right now, I think we'll just keep our head down and continue to move towards completing the feasibility study. But there has been M&A activity in the basin. I guess the sector as a whole, but really in the Athabasca Basin, recently we've seen a company called UEX get acquired by UEC. So there is activity out there.
So while keeping your head down, are you you're paying attention to the rest of the M&A activities? What do you think generally about that? Like, what does it tell you for the strategy that you're employing within your company specifically?
Our strategy, as I say, I think we're a very attractive project. So there's no question about it. This is a tier 1 asset in a tier 1 location. it meets, every box, that you'd want to tick off. So, of course, it will be, I think something that is attractive to people. But for us, it's really all about moving the project forward. As I say, the goal is to get it to be a producing asset. We think the economics are robust, and it will be a premier project that looks to be developed. So, I think the M&A activity is always an inevitable part of a cycle that you see certainly in the uptick part. There's momentum in there. There is rationale for companies to get bigger and bigger. The access to capital, looking at rationalizing costs. I mean, these are the reasons why you do M&A to begin with. And so, I don't know, maybe we're part of that mix or maybe not, but, I think we keep all of our options open. But I think the key for us is to continue going forward and advancing PLS.
I believe that in terms of production and you looking to go into production, one of the options that you're possibly keeping open might be over at your neighbors and their mill. Are you guys talking? Have you ever discussed something that you can share with me?
Well, I will say that both projects are, they've completed a feasibility study, which includes building our own mill. Our pre-feasibility and our feasibility study will include building our own mill. So at the project level, on paper, it looks like you have two mills. The reality is there's a lot of potential synergies to sharing a common mill. And so I think the conversations we've had have been pretty casual, but they do exist. So I think we're cognizant of the fact that, both projects could benefit greatly by, sharing certain infrastructure, the mill being the most obvious of them all. But, there's a great deal of synergies out there. And I think you'd be doing your shareholders a disservice if you didn't, try to keep those doors open and look towards being able to realize some of these synergies. So, I do have communication there, but there's really nothing formal in place at this time.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to figure out what are the opportunities and potentially the threats on that route potentially to production. And one of those threats that I could come up with was share dilution. You're going to need $1.5 billion to build that mine, potentially more with inflation by then. Are you worried about that? Are you having internal discussions as to how you're going to handle that potentially when you get there, or how do you see it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it is a big ticket item to develop a project like this. I mean, our pre-feasibility, we were $1.2 billion Canadian for everything. There must be inflation that's factored in, in the last couple of years since we completed our pre-feasibility. So our final feasibility numbers will include inflationary aspects, and so I do think that there's certain growth there from that. I also think that we'll probably end up saving some capital off of from our earlier projections. Just a bit more efficiencies that we've seen along the way during our feasibility study, I think should help us, lower, some cost aspects. So combined with inflation, maybe that's a wash at the end of the day. But also the price of uranium is moving, in the direction that we want it to as well. So, perhaps we'll be able to use a higher number for the price of uranium as we go forward. I think to say, well, and then the other aspect that we even talked about just past few minutes ago, bringing in the R840 West, that will be additional resource into the mine plan. So that gives you a bigger resource that's in the feasibility study. All these things will have positive, I think, net effect on the overall economics of the project. So, things are looking good. I think we're we're certainly further ahead than we were a year ago. Moving, it's going forward on all cylinders.
Okay, fair game. And having mentioned dilution, though, there's something that I've been wondering for a while now is why you're keeping so much possibility open. Like, for example, why you would need as much money as you have the access to right now with the 250 million base shelf facility that you have. You opted for that late last year, and then you opted for another ATM facility of $50 million, if I'm not mistaken. You opened that early this year. I mean, it looked like last time we spoke, you had plenty of warrants that could come in. Then you also had you had some millions. I cannot remember what, but it was double digits, I guess, sitting in cash on the bank. So
Yeah.
why did you have to open those facilities that are worth potentially up to $300 million?
So when we talked a year ago, I think we had, if I recall correctly, we had about $50 million in the Treasury Canadian, 50 million
Mhm.
Canadian. We're now at about $35 million. And I think the big spend on the feasibility study, most of those, expenses are behind us now. There is additional expenses in on the regulatory front. The further advanced the project gets, the more more costly the regulatory part goes, and we'll also on the relationship, the Indigenous agreements. There's also cost to there as well. But I think that as you move forward, between now and say 2026, there's going to be further expenses down the road. I do one clarification I just want to make on the prospectus for $250 million. We did follow with an ATM facility of 50 million, but that's part of that 250, so it's not in addition. Okay. 250 plus 50. It's all part of the $250 million prospectus on the ATM facility. So we do have the the ability with the ATM to be able to raise at the market $50 million over the next course of 14 or 15 months or so. There's no obligation that we will raise that much. We'll kind of be smart about it. But if we're raising money, it'll be used for what we actually need. I don't want to go overboard. We want to keep a healthy treasury, of course, going forward, but it gives us a flexibility to raise as much money as we need, but not the obligation to do so.
Sure, but then I'm sort of trying to calculate this: 50 million, 15 months, 3.3 million a month. What would you, and you've got the 30 something in a bank as you did. What would you spend that much money on? Is there something that could take that much money out of you?
Yeah, well, I guess there are a number of costs as you move forward, even pre-capital costs. As I say, 2026 we'll be looking to build them. Start construction. That's when you have to have the big money in place, $2 billion. But there's also you could call it pre-production costs, a little bit of small development that you would do prior to the main part of the development. It's just, I think it's important to always have, something in the order of $30 to $40 million in your treasury that you can access. You do have some major costs down the road. It's just important to, I don't want to get to the state that we were at, a few years ago. We were well south of $10 million, in the treasury, and it was, difficult to navigate. And I think having a healthy treasury really goes a long way to being able to continue on your timelines and be in control of your timelines. So don't look to us to continue to. We won't raise a lot of money and dilution just for the sake of raising money. It will be purpose meant, and although there is a $50 million facility for the ATM, it's whether we raise that entire amount or only a portion of it. It'll be I wouldn't raise it just to have 50 million extra.
You said that you've been growing your team, though, so I suspect that too raises your expenses. Combine that with inflation. How's all that influenced your SG&A?
Not too bad, actually. When I say building the team, it's building it in house. So prior to that, we had been using mostly consultants, third party groups to help us. Bringing that expertise in house sort of switches some of the costs that you would have with consultants to putting them on the payroll, but it's really using almost the same dollar amount. So our G&A hasn't changed particularly over the last even 2 or 3 years, to be honest. I do target around $4 million a year, and if we can do less than that, that's great. But that's our G&A total is budgeted currently at around just under 4 million.
Okay, and in terms of inflation, you're also not feeling that too much in your SG&A right now, or how should I look at that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's maybe not too much. I mean, wages. Let's count on about 10 to 15% inflation. I think is a reasonable estimate if you're looking for just an overall general sense. That. But overall, we've been able to keep our costs at a minimal, and we're an efficient group to get done what we do. So I still am comfortable with our number 4 million. That includes all the marketing as well, and so wages, running the company, all the marketing, anything that's not operation.
What about your eventual cost of production, though? Because I've got your presentation up on here as we speak.
Yeah.
You'd often call yourself one of the lowest cost uranium producers. I mean, there's something along those lines. And you quote all these very low prices that I cannot imagine you taking uranium out of the ground for these prices. Like you have your OPEX at $7, operating costs. What is it? Yeah, $7 that you have it. Total would probably be at about 20. Have you been doing any calculations on how inflation is influencing that?
There is, but you'll see those kind of numbers come out with the new feasibility study, later on this year. So I don't want to jump ahead too far, but I don't think there's any I doubt there's substantial changes. I think this will continue to show it to be an extremely low operating cost, one of the lowest in the world. Our $7, just north of $7 a pound operating costs. That was also based on a smaller resource, and now we'll be adding in the R840 West into there as well. Not sure what effect that will have on the overall operating cost, but I don't see any reason other than inflation that I'm guessing 15-ish%, maybe 15 to 20, maybe 20 is the high level mark there. But the price of uranium is also, as I say, it's one of the factors that's actually moving in our favor too. So that has a positive effect. You do have inflation built in there, but the price of the commodity that you're after is going up. I think that that'll help balance offset any increases that we do have.
Okay. Just sort of looking at the notes that I've made in terms of what else. Yeah, you had these. You sort of mentioned it at the beginning too. You had these. Do I want to call them issues? I guess you can call them issues with the First Nations last year. What do we know more today than we did about a year ago in terms of expenses, but also in terms of where they stand, the conversation between you guys, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, these are long-term discussions and relationships that you build over time. I think in the news probably last fall, one of the First Nation groups in the area, the CRDN, the Clearwater River Dene Nation, they were making news saying that industry needed to, work cooperatively with them, and that was also a message for the government as well. I think that the goal there on their part was to make sure that they weren't forgotten, but they're not forgotten. In fact, they were our first agreement that we have in place, and you'll probably note, even just go to our website, you'll see some great videos, conversations that I've had with the elected chief of the CRDN. They're quite happy with the way Fission has acted as a corporate entity. Our relationship's good and strong. So there was nothing about Fission in particular. I think it was just a general message to the government and the industry to make sure that that these relationships are continued to be understood, and that's fine. We accept that, and we want to build strong long-term relationships. And I'd say, seeing us sign 2 additional agreements in this calendar year, one with the Yataneni land resource, and also the Buffalo River Dene Nation. I think we now have 3 such agreements in place, and there's probably 2 more that we feel are outstanding. So towards the end of this year, hopefully we'll be able to have agreements in place with all the key Indigenous groups in the area, and we have also long-term relationships with the municipalities. We support a number of events out in the local community. So we're doing everything that we can to build our profile and understanding that Fission is a good corporate neighbor. We want to build responsibly in the area, and I think that we're being recognized as a company that leads in that.
How does that work in terms of expenses, though? Like, what do you have to spend money on that? For example, let's imagine a perfect company, and that perfect company does not have these First Nation issues to deal with. What are you spending that perfect company wouldn't be spending?
I think a lot of it is making sure that when we do, say, environmental studies, that we're paying to have their own representatives join in these environmental studies, so that the first of all, it builds transparency in there as well. But there's a certain cost, obviously, when you increase the number of personnel that are involved. But there's a great deal of transparency built into that as well. These are not material numbers at this stage, to an agreement. I think where that has a much higher impact is when you look to sign, the impact benefit agreements with the key groups. So we're at the level where our agreements are not particularly material dollar-wise. There is an expense to them, but it's not. It's really more about building the framework and the groundwork for your eventual IBA, which, it's tough to put those numbers down until you actually have a feasibility study and you know what the economics of the project are. Then I think that those conversations more naturally develop. So at this stage, it's really building teams on there, helping to support their building of expertise and teams that can look at the project, look at the data, be able to provide comfort level back to their group that Fission is moving forward in a proper manner. So yeah, I think that it's more really all about getting the framework in place to do what we need to do. The costs they'll probably come in a little bit later on. So I think once the feasibility study is done, we look to advance, IBAs. I don't know what those costs will be because they're negotiated, and at that time, and we're not at that level just yet.
And you obviously need to do all that work to advance your FS. What else are you doing this year? Like, if you hang up the phone after this conversation, what's sort of the next 3 things that you got to do? I assume you're going to London too earlier next month. Yeah. Or what else?
Yeah. So, in the other part of the equation too, you have all the operation stuff. We've discussed a little bit about that. There's marketing involved in the with moving the company forward too, and getting eyes on the story. So you're right. The W&A, the World Nuclear Association, has an annual meeting in London in September. We're generally participants of that, have been over the last 10 to 15 years, except for the 2-year period during COVID where there was no travel involved. But it'll be good to get back into London to attend the W&A. It's a great networking opportunity for us. I'll be continuing doing a bit more marketing throughout Europe. We already have a number of great long-term loyal shareholders in Europe, but I think it's important to meet people face to face. And now that we're able to get out and travel a little bit more, I'm excited to start seeing people there. So I'll be going through Switzerland, France, and also in Belgium as well. So yeah, we've got an exciting September lined up ahead, and we continue to attend the conferences and the mining investment forums that we think are best suited to continue to get our name out. And but I think it's important to continue to see people that are long-term shareholders face to face. Those sort of meetings are critical to this business.
What about in terms of news? Because last piece of news that I see on your website is from over a month ago, and it was about the communication agreement that you had with BRDN. Yep. What are you looking to release in terms of news?
So I think the next group of news, obviously, the assays from the metallurgical holes on the R840 West. I'm hoping that they're sooner rather than later. With hopefully we'll be able to put them out sometime in September, maybe mid to later September. If we're able to build further agreements with our Indigenous communities, we'll be able to announce that. But I think that the real, a big step forward or big news should be our feasibility study towards the end of this calendar year. So I think it's moving the project along through feasibility, meeting important agreements with the Indigenous people. Those are all newsworthy stories, and I think that'll be kind of what the remainder of 2022 is all about.
I just hope you keep feeding the excited uranium market some news, because I guess now would be the time with seasonality and the spot market also sort of drying up almost to inexistence. As UXC recently mentioned, they believe that there's less than 20 million pounds left in a spot. So it's going to be an interesting seasonality for you to be releasing news. Hopefully that helps your case if you have to use your ATM facility too. In terms of the share price, that'd be interesting too, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we're very careful about dilution. And I know that comes up, and it's come up in your conversations here. You're not the only person. All shareholders, and I'm a shareholder as well. I do care about dilution. I want, there's always a balance in building shareholder value, through the, advancing the project. But you do what you have to do to continue to fund those activities until you get to a point where cash flow is going the other way. But as a large shareholder myself, I look at it from that perspective as well. So
you're mentioning yourself as a larger shareholder, and you're reminding me of something that you told me last time we spoke, which was that you thought Fission was undervalued at it was over $1 per share when we spoke back then. Yeah. And at one point during this most recent correction uranium stocks did, Fission fell as low as 50, 55, 60 cents, something along those lines. So how come you were not a buyer at those levels if you already thought it was undervalued at twice that level?
Well, it depends what capital you have available to buy at. But the one thing I will say is I have not sold any shares of Fission. I'm a long-term believer in the price, and I'd probably will pick my opportunities to continue to support the share price. I still think even right now, although we've had a good run in the last couple of weeks, which has been sector wide, to be honest. I'll probably look to continue to add to my position, but I'm a firm believer in this story. I think we're a long-term shareholder, and will continue to be.
Well, you haven't been selling any shares. You haven't been buying either, but nobody has really been buying within your management team. And it's also kind of, I guess, alarming for me to see your VP of exploration, Ashley Raymond, I believe that is, right? Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of selling. It was almost all selling over the last year or something. Did you know what's happening? Like, why is he selling so much?
Well, yeah, I think they were all almost entirely option driven. He, was able to exercise options, convert them to shares, and then take the shares, sell them. There was far too much activity on for my liking in there. It's not really something I control. You people do what they want to do, but I certainly don't encourage anybody to trade that. There was a number of trades there, and I don't think it represented any sentiment from anybody in the group. The main players, not senior management, not the board. It was just one person, selling whatever shares he had. And I think at this point he probably has very few shares in the company. But not everybody is thinks as an investor. They're different philosophy. But yeah, I think what's important is look what I'm doing. I'm maintaining my shares and will continue to add to that position.
I hope you do, yeah, because I believe with the, if you go through that 50 million ATM dilution, you would hold less than 1% of the company. And just the message that you're sending into the market when the team is selling is never great. I mean, I'm glad that you can come on and you're explaining it to me. Basically, this is a way for people within the company to get paid. They get paid in shares or in options or whatever. They do this job. Their job is not easy. Their job is it's not a light job. They want to get paid. I get that. They have to sell some shares here and there. But just sort of the message, if you open up the SEDI filing and I've got it up on here, and then you click, for example, on the all buys and sells on the open market, and all that you see for the last year sells, it just sort of sends an alarming message to the market. So that's why I'm targeting it in here.
I think it's a valid question. I appreciate your asking it, but it's one person, and at the end of the day, I don't think it's not. Although you can see it optically, it's not good. Materially, I think just seeing what the senior executive management is doing, what the board's doing, I think is a better sentiment on how we feel about the company and the project going forward.
Okay. So you're advancing. You're doing your thing. I'm just thinking what else I should be asking. What do you think I should be asking? What's one thing that you want to be asked but I'm forgetting to ask?
Well, I think that probably the same message I had before. I think that if investors have not looked at nuclear, I think that they really should be, and they should be looking at tier 1 projects in tier 1 jurisdictions. I think that the whole geopolitical risk environment is certainly front and center. Anything in the Athabasca these days is certainly a pretty good place to be. I think there's some great deposits out there. There's good management. I think our story is excellent, but there are others that are moving forward too. And I just encourage everybody to take a peek at what's happening in the Athabasca Basin. And I think just understanding that that nuclear is such an important part of the clean green energy revolution. I think that's going on right now. I think we're going to be in the right place at the right time with the right project.
Let's look at some of your peers that you're referencing here, Ross, because the last time we spoke, you told me that I gave you the I call the gun to your head scenario. If you had to sell everything you have and you only buy 3 stocks, what would you buy? You told me that you like the Athabasca Basin specifically.
Yeah.
Obviously a little bit biased, you being there. I would not expect you to say something else, but fair game. And you gave me Next Gen Denison and obviously your own company.
Right.
But since that time, there has been a lot happening in the Athabasca Basin, as you would know. Some of the explorers have also shown great potential. They've shown that there's something below their feet. Would you change that top 3 that you gave me last year? Would you change that today?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends what category you're looking at. Obviously, Cameco, the bellwether company in the in the business of major mining company. I think all the developers, when I consider the 3 Fission, Next Gen, Denison as the ones with the most advanced development projects to go. I still support all of them. I think they're all very good. I look at the exploration successes that are happening. I really like what 92 Energy's been, finding. I think recently they've got a new discovery on the eastern side of the basin. I think that's kind of exciting. And obviously ISO Energy is, quickly moving up to the category where, they're a little further behind than some of the other development stories, but I think they're getting there as well. So there's some really good stories coming out of the Athabasca Basin, but I think that those explorers, 92 Energy in particular, I still like the land package that our spinoff Fission 3 has. I think they're aggressive this year. Looking, there's some signs that they're in the fertile system in the right place to be to make a discovery. I think that the more activity there is, I think these discoveries will continue to happen. But I think this is still the premier uranium district in the world. I'm firm believer in that.
All right. Well, thank you for that overview. I'm glad that you're mentioning a couple of other names on the other end. I'm invested in one of the companies on the other end of 92's deposit, which is potentially all the same deposit. So that's an interesting point too. Well, I think I'm all out of questions here, Ross. Is there something else that you want to add here at the end, or should I let you go?
No, I think we've covered a fair amount of ground. It's a good update. I think everything we talked about a year ago is our timelines are the same. We've just continued to move and advance, and the story's good. But I do think the whole nuclear sector, the whole nuclear story, just continues to improve. The macro stories, I encourage everybody to continue following it. News in Japan, the turnaround in the sentiment in South Korea as well. I don't know. There's just so many good stories out there. I think that we're in for a very long, early, bull run, and I think we're in the early innings of that game.
All right. Well, I hope you're right. My wife would also probably hope you're right, given that my portfolio is overweight in uranium too. So, yeah, I really hope you're right
as well.
Thank you for stopping by today, Ross.
Thank you, Antonio.